Good morning. Hey, if you don't know me, my name is Eric Gray. I'm the director of ministry here. I rotate throughout the campuses, so you see a lot of speakers here. So if it's your first time, welcome. Thank you for joining us. If you guys are joining us online, welcome. Please let us know if we have prayer requests we can answer for you guys. If we have any questions, we want to be able to welcome you the best way possible here. Guys, before we do get into the sermon, I want to make an announcement. We have annual events that occur here every year. We have a men's retreat and a women's retreat. They're kind of off schedule from what they've typically been. So the women used to have theirs in July. The women are having theirs at the end of August this year. The men usually have theirs the third week of August, and everything changed on us starting Monday this week. So Monday, all of a sudden, we learned, hey, the slot we had wasn't there anymore. So we went into scramble mode, and we shut down registration, and we tried to figure some things out. And so here's the new details. If you're interested in the men's retreat, it is happening in less than 3 weeks. It's happening on August 5th and 6th. So that's a different time. It's happening at Camp Dixie, so that's a different location. And if you need to know anything about that, please let me know. And then, so the only real big difference other than those two is we're used to like motel-like rooms when we go there. This time it's going to be bunkhouses with mattresses. We have to bring our own bedding. But if you're like half the guys that go, we stay up all night playing spades and sharing testimony and stuff like that, so sleeping's not really an issue anyway. But this is like that great opportunity once a year for now 3 campuses under the RockFish tent to be able to get together and for all the men to meet each other and create new relationships, for all the women to get to know each other and create new relationships. Now, ladies, nothing changed except the time for you, so you're still at the same place, same bat channel. It's going to look the same for you. For us, it's going to look a little different, guys. I'm excited about it. The ladies ought to be jealous. We get access to more activities because we had to go to Camp Dixie. So it ought to be pretty good. So ladies, we'll cancel yours next year so you can have some more fun. All right, so hey guys, we're in week 3 of our series, Everyday Saints, which is faithfulness in the day-to-day. And so instead of we usually spend most of our time looking at these main characters in the Bible, right? We focus on Abraham or Moses or David and obviously Jesus, right? But the everyday saints are the guys we're focusing on this week. And so last week we told the story of Abigail and her interaction with David and how she was this no-name person. We get her for literally 1 chapter in the Bible, and that's it. She's not mentioned anywhere else. And who we're going to focus on this week is Jonathan. He's the son of Saul. We see him a little bit more, but he's still, in the grand scheme of things, he's not one of those big names that we know. But I want to start out with a story of this man named Jim Elliot. He was a missionary back in the 1950s. And so on February 2nd, 1952, Jim Elliot, he said goodbye to his parents, and he boarded a ship from San Pedro, California, and he headed out to Ecuador. They were headed specifically for Quito, Ecuador, and he took his wife and his young children with him. And about 3 years later, the tribe that he went to go interact with and bring the gospel to, this was the Quechuas, they became faithful Christians. And so it took 3 years for that faithful ministry. But right about that time, he felt a new calling, like, okay, now it's time for us to move in a new direction. We need to find a new tribe. We need to continue spreading the gospel. And so January 2nd, 1956, so a little less than 4 years after he had departed the first trip, his partners made contact with a new tribe called the Wurani. And we're going to stop right there. We'll pick that story up back a little bit later, but this is just a simple man doing exactly what he's been called to do as an everyday saint. In Ephesians 4:1, it tells us, as a prisoner for the Lord, then I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you have received. So we want to talk about what does it look like? What does it mean for us to walk worthy of this calling that we've received? It's been put on us. It's not optional, right? How do we do that? What does that look like for us? So first off, we need to desire to be able to fulfill that calling that God's put on us. Right, but some of these things, in order to, our life is in God's hands. It's in Jesus' hands, what he did on the cross for us. And I need you to envision it like this. You cannot fully grasp what's been given to you with one hand. You need both hands. So picture yourself on a cliff. We were destined to fall. We were destined to be at the bottom of that cliff. Regardless of when it was going to happen for us, we were going to be there because of our sinfulness. Now, he reached out and he grabbed our hand. But we spend our life holding on to other things with this other hand that he hasn't grabbed yet. We have to choose. He made the first reach, right? We have to choose to let go of these other things in our life and take hold with both hands. Because you can't hold on for too long with just one hand. All right, so like I said, we're going to talk about Jonathan today. And to put things in perspective, Jonathan is the son of King Saul, who's the first king of Israel. And at the same time, he is best friends with David. They've got a really tight relationship. As far as describing close relationships within the Bible, there isn't one described as intimate as this anywhere else in the Bible. These guys are best friends. They are brothers, blood in and blood out. That's what they do. It's who they are. Right? That's the love and appreciation they have for each other. So I want to set the scene for 1 Samuel chapter 19, verses 1 through 7. So God has already rejected Saul as king. He's already corrupted himself, and God no longer has a purpose for him. And so because of this, God has already anointed young David as the next king. And David has already killed Goliath, and because David has killed Goliath, there's this jealousy that is sprouted up within Saul, who once had an appreciation for David and his ability to help Saul win battles in key moments within the kingdom. He now has this animosity and jealousy towards him. Why? Because he hears other people within the kingdom singing the praises of Saul at this level and singing the praises of David at this level. And yet David's really humbled through all this process. He is trying to be obedient as a child of God. He's trying to do exactly what God's called him to do, and he's waiting until God calls him to do it. He's not trying to overtake the throne, even though he knows he's destined to be the next king. But we can't get past this. He can't bypass what's going on with Saul internally and how that's coming out of him as a king with edicts and declarations about how things need to be taken care of with David. And so he actually commits to, he's gonna send his men out, including his son Jonathan, to kill David because he's too jealous and he's too insecure to be able to remain king while there's this better future outlook for the kingdom. And so when Jonathan is commanded to go and find and kill David, he goes into action, but he doesn't go into action as an obedient son of his father, right? He sees the flaws in this. Instead, he goes into action for God. And so in 1 Samuel 19, verses 4 through 7, as we zoom in on the back part of the story, Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul, his father, and said to him, he said, "Let not the king do wrong to his servant David. He has not wronged you, and what he has done benefited you greatly." And it continues, it says, Saul listened to Jonathan and took his own oath. He said, "As surely as the Lord lives, David will not be put to death." So Jonathan called David and told him the whole conversation. He brought him to Saul, and David was with Saul as before. So because Jonathan was willing to move in obedience to the Lord, not to even his father and yet the king, right? He's able to set that aside and all the complexities that come with that we're going to unpack today. He's obedient to God, and with that we see restoration in this moment, right? So even though David is this great character we see, he's this Christ-like representative within the Bible. In this moment, Jonathan is the Christ-like representative in the Bible. And it's Jonathan's obedience, it's his faithfulness that brings this about. And so, but I don't want us to focus, I want to be very clear, we're not focusing on the fact that Jonathan got to see the results of his faithfulness, because not all of us are going to see it. But that doesn't mean we're not called to it in the first place. Some of us are going to be faithful until the last day, and we will never see the fruit that we prayed and worked for. But it doesn't mean it's not going to come to bear. It doesn't mean somebody else isn't going to pluck that and harvest it for us or for God, right? So I want us to focus on, again, that Jonathan was willing to act. It doesn't matter that he got to see that fruitfulness, just that he was willing to be obedient and set some things on the line, right? So he took his life in his own hands when he killed the Philistine. The Lord won a great victory for all Israel, and you saw it and were glad. Why then would you do wrong to an innocent man like David by killing him for no reason? This is Jonathan's plea to his father. He could have very easily said, you know what? Think about the real world application of a non-Christian in this moment. How are they going to react? They're the prince. They're the son of the king, which means they're the next in line for the throne. And I got this really good friend right here, but everybody loves him so much, and because of my father and his faults, now I've lost my place as the next in line in this dynasty, or would-be dynasty, right? He could have reacted very differently. He could have been worried about his ambitions, his concerns, his power and authority in the kingdom. But instead, he saw the need to serve a friend and the need to help correct his father, who just happens to be the king. And that took a great amount of courage and a great amount of self-cost. I can't even think of the right word for that, right? But it cost him something greatly. He could have played a different role here. So allegiance to God's kingdom may come at a personal cost to us. We need to understand that. All right? Jonathan was willing to set it aside. We need to be willing to set it aside too. So what are those things that we need to be willing to let go of? Right? So we already know that Jonathan, he gave up the possibility of a much greater future. But the difference is he would have gone down, and he would have been written about much more differently. Horrible language today. I apologize. My words are twisted or getting all tangled. We could have seen him in a completely different light had he acted differently. But instead, we see him as such a loyal friend and such an obedient follower of God. But he gave up 4 very clear things that we're going to talk about today. And so the first one is comfort, right? And so he convinces David to hide. And so while Jonathan speaks to his father, the king, he's got David off to the side. He said, go, I'll let you know what he says. I'll come to you and I'll tell you everything. I'll give you every word of the conversation. I'll let you know exactly what happened, right? But this had to be an uncomfortable conversation. I mean, this is treason. He's going before the king and he's saying, hey, don't do this. This guy that you've declared an enemy, don't do it. Change your mind. Reset your focus on this. Be humble. Not common traits in many kings, right? In many rulers, especially in a much more primitive age. So the amount of courage alone it took him to go do this, right? To address not just a king, but a jealous, spiteful, ungodly, bloodthirsty king at this moment. And he did it specifically in the defense of the king's enemy, or the guy that the king felt was his enemy, right? But he had to speak truth to power. He had to stand up to his father in this moment. And it could have cost him everything. So he had to convince his father that what he was doing was wrong, and that he had to set his comfort aside. It's very easy for us to weigh a situation, especially when it's relationally, right? The comfort we find in our relationships daily with the person next to us, with the person we have lunch with the person we work with, the people we rely on a daily basis. We find comfort in these things that are immediately in front of us and tangible. But a Christian has to look beyond that for comfort, because anything that's tangible could be taken from you. But if we look within the supernatural, we look within the spiritual, like that doesn't leave us. We don't have to lose that connection. And so Jonathan's looking somewhere other than the physical and the tangible for his comfort in this moment. So how do we apply this to ourselves? So how do we handle our need for comfort? I'm extremely grateful. I grew up in a generation where air conditioning exists. I mean, think about the little things that we take for granted, right? How many, anybody stress eat, or they have that comfort food? Come on, ladies, I know you seek out some chocolate, every once in a while. I know it. Hey, don't let me find donuts when I'm in a bad mood, because the whole dozen will be gone, right? So we'll seek out comfort in the smallest things, right? We'll seek out comfort in finding safe circles, the groups of people that think and act and speak and look like us. But it doesn't mean it's the most beneficial for us, and it definitely doesn't mean it's the most beneficial for the kingdom when we stay within these safe circles. And we find comfort in excuses that allow us to set aside our responsibility and hand it to somebody else. Say, you know what, that's my calling's over here. This is Daniel's calling over here. He's got that. Well, what happens when we've only got 2 people up here worshiping today? What happens when those 2 people have COVID? Are we just gonna not have worship? No, somebody's got to come answer this calling to lead us through worship every Sunday, right? And it may not be the ones that we say are anointed or chosen for it, but it doesn't matter. We still have to fill that calling, and it's on just the simple things. So David later expressed it this way when he writes Psalm 23 in verse 4. He says, "Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." Just in case you don't have an understanding of that rod and staff, that is a direct reference to a shepherd and his sheep. A sheep, a lamb that is unwilling to hear his voice and respond properly, so he has to chase it down and break its legs and carry it. We have a God that's willing and loving enough to correct us in our wrongs, correct us in our sins, to put us on the right path and carry us through it until we're ready to walk again, ready to respond to his voice, because now we recognize that we've been walking, he's been carrying us through something, and we've been hearing him day in and day out. So also in Psalm 121, verses 1 and 2, it says, "I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth." So we have to recognize that the true comfort that we can always rely on is going to be found only in the Lord, right? It's from right being and right doing with him, walking in alignment, living in alignment, thinking in alignment with him, regardless of what our circumstances may be, because our circumstances are going to cause us to look to everything but him. We will look to the next branch, to the next steady foothold we think we can hold on to. Meanwhile, God's reaching out for us, and all we need to do is grab hold. And there's nothing wrong with comfort, so I don't want to take that away from anyone. We shouldn't feel guilty about it, but we need to be able to recognize when it's time for us to let some of those comforts go, to abandon those, whether it's for life or whether it's for a season or for a moment. We need to be able to recognize the difference between true comfort and momentary comfort. But this next one is pretty big for all of us, and that's control, right? So 2 people can't be in control of a situation. Somebody's always going to win. But here's the deal. In God's great wisdom and his benevolence, he will let you take control. And he will let you see the consequences of you taking control. Because he loves you, because he wants you to see the mistakes so that you would turn to him next time. Anybody ever had that happen? You just, I'm going to take control of a situation, right? And he'll let you have it. That's how we end up at what people call rock bottom, because we are continually trying to control something. But the problem is we're really bad drivers, and when we start getting out of control on the wet roads, we tend to overcorrect versus correct at that right level, right? And so we're like, man, I got to make a big change, and we make a big change, and we end up going in the other direction, and we run into other people. It becomes tragic for more than just one. So Jonathan, he could have helped David escape. He could have tried to control the situation, right? But he didn't. Instead, he chose a path with a less certain outcome instead of the outcome he thought he was going to be able to control. But it's our nature to think that we're going to be able to control it. We know what's best. 30 of us in this room, we see a problem in this world, right? And this is what happens with politics. This is why it dominates our culture, because everyone thinks they have the answer. And yet none of us are going to be able to fix it. because we keep trying to do it on our own. It doesn't matter how convincing our argument is to ourselves, we don't have the best solution. And until we give up control or the attempt or the illusion of control, we're never going to have it God's way. And we sit in here week in and week out, we say God's will, God's way, God's time. If it's God's way, we can't be in control. And so when we're grasping for control, we're getting in his way. I got times I feel really guilty about this in my life. And just because we attempted to have control doesn't mean it didn't end up the way God wanted it, right? But sometimes we end up reflecting on it later and it's like, man, why did I do that? God could have blessed me with a whole bunch of children, and I ended up going the medical route of making sure, hey, we shouldn't be able to have any more kids. And at the time, it was out of good reasoning, like, hey, I want to be able to provide a solid future for my kids. I don't make a whole lot of money. You know, I wanted to be able to ensure we were going to live somewhat comfortably. But what did I maybe miss out on? Maybe we were only going to have 3 kids. Maybe we were going to have 17. I don't know. But I don't know. I don't know when my attempt to control the situation actually affected it and when God would have delivered differently. I wouldn't say it haunts me, but there's just certain things we can't necessarily escape. And so Saul, he was really insecure and he was really jealous at this point. And he could have turned his insecurities, right? And Jonathan's not the only one that responds well in this situation, right? Saul realizes he listens to reason, he hears his son, and he recenters himself, right? He could have responded completely differently, but he didn't. He didn't even allow himself to control the situation. He listened to a subservient person. So in Matthew 10:39, it says, whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. So we can either attempt again and again and again and again to pursue the life we want or think we deserve, right? Or we can get the life that God had purpose for us. I think it's really good to remind ourselves on a regular basis of, hey, well, what do we actually deserve? Because the more we convince ourselves of what we actually deserve, the less demanding we become of God and the more humble we are to approach. So I have a decently nice truck. I'm sure other guys have nicer trucks, but it's like the nicest thing I ever bought myself. And shortly after I bought it, some of the guys at the church were like, hey, man, like that's awesome. We're happy for you. You deserve it. I'm like, nope, I deserve to go to hell. And the more often we can remind ourselves that that's where we deserve to be, that's what we deserve to spend, where we deserve to spend our eternity, the more grateful and more humble we are with the Lord. So we've been given this free will, right? And I told you, God reaches out and he gets one hand. You have this free will of whether you're going to let go of that other stuff and grab hold of him with your other hand, or you're going to continue trying to hold other things. And this is supposed to be an encouraging message. I'm a really negative, critical guy. Sometimes it comes out wrong. I just want you to know this is supposed to be uplifting. I'm probably the wrong guy for it. I don't know. Are we good? Okay. So, see, sometimes we, question ourselves. So Jonathan, he gives up security as well, right? And so it's because of the desire for security, that we end up going towards control on such a regular basis, right? It gives us, again, this sense of security because I've got control of the situation. But so if things didn't go how Jonathan hoped, he would have found himself on the run with David. He would have been put out of the household, and he could have been banished out of the kingdom totally, right? But he realized that being on the right side with God was more important than this personal security. He was ready to abandon this sense of security to do what he was supposed to do, to act as a godly man. And so look what Jesus said to the key to security here in Matthew 6:33. He says, but But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. And so it's just before this when Jesus is speaking about food and clothing, like the necessities, those things that we say they're critical for our function in these human bodies in this world, right? There's these necessities that we say we need. And as Jesus is addressing that, he follows it with, but seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all this will be given to you. So if we believe that, then that becomes the seeking for security. Now I don't have to go look for all these things and abandon being godly and being righteous. I can seek his kingdom, and because of it, I'll be rewarded with other things. I say other things, to be clear. I mean, meeting of my needs, not possessions. But he says this specifically so that we will follow him. But again, everything outside of Jesus Christ is an illusion. This sense of control, this sense of security, it's an illusion. It's temporary. Every wall that's been built is going to be knocked down one day. Businesses fail, right? I was talking to a brother last night, and he said he moved to this area about a year ago with his fiance. Now they're married, but they've been here a year, and all of a sudden now he's lost his job. I mean, businesses let people go every day. The stock market is terrifying at this point. If you felt good about your investments over the last 20 years, then you probably just don't even want to look at your account right now. And the dollar is losing value. Like, we can't find comfort and security in these other things. So even in the midst of these types of circumstances, we do have the benefit. We can receive this sense of security, this true security, through his promises, through what he tells us. It's not like some guy on the corner is selling it with a sign, telling us, hey, come in here. I got this sense of security for you. No, this is Jesus' words, talking about his Father and what will be given. And lastly, Jonathan he's willing to give up his life. So I said he could have been cast out of the family, he could have been cast out of the kingdom, but the reality is, because he was committing treason, because he was going before a hostile king, he could have found himself imprisoned because he was the son, could have found himself killed. All that stuff was on the line. His life was on the line. He had to risk it. He could have chosen to do nothing. He could have just been silent. He could have been absent from the situation. But he laid it all on the line as the Jesus figure in this moment. So we need to recognize of these things. So comfort, control, security in our lives. We need to realize that when holding on to these things, again, none of them are truly bad in their own, right? But we need to be able to recognize when it's time for us to let go of any of those things, because there will be a time or a season or a permanent portion of our lives where what we were trying to hold on to, what we were seeking and finding comfort in, these things are no longer compatible with our walk with Christ. So a couple of years ago, we had somebody call the church and say they were experiencing demonic type things in their house, and they would wake up with wounds on their back and stuff like that. Sounds pretty crazy. Maybe you've never experienced that kind of thing. Never experienced it myself personally, but we do acknowledge the supernatural. These kind of things are out there. But here's the deal, this person, so we go to their house and we're like, all right, we're going to take a look around, we're going to pray over the house, kind of feel it out and see what's happening. And it was really weird. I didn't speak up at the moment, but the second somebody told me who we were going to see, I didn't know the person. I didn't even understand the name that was said. But I was like, for whatever reason, I just knew, like, hey, we're going to a house of a person who's Native American. They probably got Native American stuff all in the house. Right? And nothing against Native American culture or Native American people. That's not the issue. The point is, there are things that are incompatible spiritually once you commit your life to Christ. And this person at this time was experiencing exactly what many people experience when they're trying to hold on to Jesus up here and they're trying to not let go of things down here. And so all God's doing in that moment is he's allowing us to experience the results of our choices. He's revealing the negative effects that it's having on our spiritual lives so that we would have the opportunity to make the right choice and to let go of these things. And unfortunately, in that moment, this person, this woman and her husband, they were unwilling to say, hey, you know what? I hear what you're saying, but I can't get rid of these things. My father, who is the medicine man for his tribe, he did these spiritual ceremonies with this feather over here, and I can't let it go. Or this bowl over here was used for this, and I can't let it go just yet. It's like, truthfully, there's really no point in praying in the home at that point, right? So even if we're successful in casting out whatever's causing her these problems, she was unwilling to separate herself from them, which means these things are coming back stronger next time. Or our prayer has no effect in that situation because it's got such a stronghold in the house. And I don't say all that to sound really kooky. It's not like we go do this stuff a whole bunch of times, right? This is not an often practice. But the reality is there are times when we are having these things revealed to us. You've been seeking comfort and security and peace from these objects, from these practices, from these rituals you do, whatever they may be. And it's time to cast it out. And Jesus is saying, now's the time to make a choice. Now, thankfully, that woman and her husband, about 2-3 weeks later, they came and let us know, like, hey, we got rid of all that stuff, and now things are good in the home. Like, we didn't even have to go in the home and pray. But we need to recognize the incompatible things in our lives. It could be the music we listen to. It could be the TV shows we watch. It could be the company we keep. It could be the loyalties to just certain activities and hobbies we've had for generations, whatever it may be. We need to be ready to let any of it go when we see that it is getting in the way. It's interfering in this frequency between us and the Most High God. So Paul says this in Colossians 3:3. He says, "For you died, and your life is now hidden with Christ in God." So died is past tense, right? So this already happened. You're already dead. You're a dead man, dead woman walking. Jonathan recognized that his future belonged to God. He already had been claimed by God. He had been circumcised and therefore been consecrated to the Lord. He knew who he belonged to. Any other loyalty above that was gonna put him in a bad place with God. So we need to recognize that we are not our own, that we've been purchased, and we were purchased at full price. It wasn't like some layaway purchase. God's like, I'll pay you off sooner or later, right? Nope. Before we were ever born, we were paid for. And he gave his life. He gave his perfect life in exchange for ours, and that transaction occurred in full in that moment. So what he did at that moment, he reclaimed possession and title and deed to our lives from Satan, right? But that was from Satan. We still got to give it up ourselves. It's on us to move and speak and act and live as though we've been purchased in full. So we need to be like Jonathan. We need to be recognizing and moving and setting all relationships on fire if we need to when we see them interfering with our relationship with God. So back to our story with Jim Elliot at the beginning here. So Jim Elliot wrote this on October 28th, 1949. This is about a little over 2 years before he ever left California in the first place. Can we switch slide? All right. He wrote, he is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. Maybe that was the catalyst, him being able to put that on paper and think that out loud, that put him on the path to what it is he was supposed to do with those tribes in South America. And so I told you on January 2nd, 1956, they went out to meet that new tribe, the Wurani, right? 6 days later, January 8th, 1956, he Pete Fleming, Ed McCauley, Nate Saint, and Roger Udarian, they were all martyred in Ecuador. Martyred for the cause they were going to support, right? They went to bring the gospel to people for those people's benefit, and it cost them their lives. They never got to see the benefit that just a few years later, their wives and children would bring to fruition. That's why I say we can't be focused on, well, I'm not seeing the results of my labor. I'm not seeing the results, the fruit of my faithfulness to the Lord. You may never see it, and that should not be a qualifier for continuing down that path. And so we have this same choice that these men made, these missionaries, right? Do we hold on to what we cannot keep? And do we do that at the cost of what we cannot lose? Or do we give up what we cannot keep to gain what we cannot lose? The choice is ours, clearly, right? Free will. We have that choice. God does not make that choice for us. He just makes it very clear that there is a choice to be made. So what is God calling you to give up to live fully for his kingdom? And I say to give up, truthfully, it's just to be willing to give it up. Because if your heart's right on any matter, you may not even be called to give it up. In fact, you may have more of it because you realize this can't be the priority. My desire to watch my sports team every week is getting in the way with my relationship with God. I'm going to set that aside, even though it's been something I've done for years. I did it with my dad, and it brings me to peace. There's this comfort in it. I enjoy it. But it's interfering with my relationship, so I'm going to set it aside. It's funny how when those kind of things occur, when you make those decisions, every once in a while, you're kind of rewarded for it. Not just in the, I got a little bit closer to God today. I got one more obstacle between me and him out of the way. But sometimes, hey, he just reschedules when those games are happening, and it's not getting in the way anymore. So our hobbies, our possessions, our food, our house, our priorities, relationships. I think above all else, it's probably relationships for most of us. They bring us this false sense of security, this false sense of control. And sometimes they get in the way. I'm not trying to bring anybody down today. I want you to know God wants you to have these things. He tells you if you seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, you will have these things. But the more we continue to push for these things in our lives, the further we get from him, the more we jam up that frequency. I just want you to be ready to count the cost and ready to say, I got to give this up. It's getting in the way. It's been revealed to me today after 10 years that I can no longer continue doing this or listen to this or watching this or partaking in this or hanging out with this person because it's interfering with me. I just want you to be willing to let it go. I want you to examine yourself this week. What am I willing to give up? And more importantly, what is revealed to me that, man, I don't feel like I'm ready to give it up just yet. And I'll ask you to pray for that courage that Jonathan had, to be ready to lay it all on the line, whatever it may be, so that we would not be the ones interfering. There's enough people trying to interfere with our relationship with God, amen? Like, we need to be the last ones trying to interfere with it on purpose. So when something's revealed, we got to be ready to throw it as far away as we can. I just want to give you guys that wisdom today. That I want that. I want God. I'm going to pray for in just a second. I want God to reveal that for you this week. What is your crutch? What is it you feel you can't get by without, that you would be unwilling to let go of on your own, and that you would be given the courage and the conviction to let it go? So stand with me if you're able. We'll get out of here in just a second. Father God, we thank you. We love you. We give you glory and honor, praise, Lord. You are the one true living God. You give us your promises, Lord. You tell us to seek you, and we shall find. Lord, you tell us to seek your kingdom, to seek righteousness with you, Lord, and that we would receive the things that we need, the things that would comfort us, things that would Give us an extra layer of security. Pray that you would reveal in us right now, Lord, all week long, that we would be convicted of the things that have us that we don't have. If we're holding to our money a little too tightly, if we're holding to a bad relationship a little too tightly, Lord, that you would reveal that we are going to be all right because we have you. We are going to be okay. We are going to be healthy. We're going to be strong. We're going to be courageous because we have you, not because we have any of these things or people or activities in our lives. Lord, I pray that you would give us that peace, that we would walk a little lighter moving forward, not carrying one more burden, but one less. I pray that you would bless every brother and sister in here hearing these words today with that revelation this week, Lord.